Hi guys, this is Jochen. Welcome to my channel. With this video I start a little series of tutorial videos about the basics of photography. So don't forget to click the subscribe button below and to activate the alarm bell right away so that you don't miss any more of these videos. Today we're going to talk about the first big mystery a beginner will come to: the exposure. Well, since you were looking for this video, you are probably a beginner in photography. That means you may have bought or received a new camera and now you want to understand what all the buttons and dials mean. You have probably already taken some pictures in automatic mode, but the results don't look the way you imagined them and you were wondering how to achieve a certain look and style in a picture. And you don't have to dive deeply into the technical aspects. I'll try to show the pragmatic way. By the way, it doesn't matter what kind of camera you want to start with. It can be a compact camera or a mirrorless camera. But in case you own a DSLR camera, I'm not going to explain the differences for this type in detail, because I guess only few people will start doing photography with such kind of gear nowadays. But even for you, the basic principles are of course the same, and I hope you will also learn a lot. From the word, photography essentially means drawing with light. So there seems to be quite a bit of art in the process of taking pictures with a camera. And we are the artists who choose the tools to influence the results of a work of art. We want to create images on film or sensor by recording light on them. To capture light on a sensor or film, we need to deal with exposure. This determines how much light falls on a more or less sensitive film or sensor for how long. So exposure seems to be the tool for painting with light on our canvas, the sensor or film. Depending on what I want to show in a picture, for example, a movement or an object that stands out from the background, or a situation at night, I have to do my exposure differently. So let's together take a look at the tool and its possibilities. What is exposure? In photographic jargon, exposure is the amount of light collected by your sensor or film. The more light hits the sensor or film, the brighter the image will be. If the amount of light is too much, the image will be overexposed. So worst case, the image is all white. So I want to show you a little metaphor to keep in mind what exposure exactly means. Imagine exposure as a water tap and a container, for example a glass, with the water being the light. The tap is the aperture. The more you open it, the more water will go through. The time the tap is open is the shutter speed. The longer it's opened, the more water will go through. The glass size is the ISO. A small glass equals a high ISO will fill more quickly. A big glass equals low ISO will fill more slowly. The glass itself is the sensor or the film. If it's overflowed, the image is overexposed. So we have three camera settings that influence the exposure. First of all, there is the aperture. Then there is the shutter speed. And we have the ISO. The aperture is the size of the opening for the light. You can see it in a camera. Depending on which aperture you choose, the opening will be bigger or smaller. Then we have the shutter speed. This is the time the shutter is open, so the time that the light will have the possibility to fall on the sensor or film. And then there is the ISO. This means photosensitivity, so film speed in photo jargon. How sensitive is the sensor or film for light? But In addition to the exposure, each of the three settings influence an additional aspect of a photo, and we will have a closer look at this. First, we have the aperture. The aperture can create a large depth of field and a small amount of light, or a small depth of field and a large amount of light. So depending on the aperture that I choose, the background will be more or less unsharp to the object that I will set my focus on. This is something you have to keep in mind, especially if you are a beginner. So the larger the aperture number, the more sharpness is created in my image. And the smaller the aperture number, or the bigger the aperture, then I will have a smaller depth of field, so I can extract my object from the background. The next is the shutter speed. It depends what I want to show in my image. Do I want to achieve a frozen movement? This will create less light on the sensor, because then my shutter speed has to be very high or fast. Or do I want to create motion blur, which will let much light on the sensor, because for this I have to open the shutter a little longer. These are the depending values for this. So with a 1/250th of a second I can create a frozen movement. But if I want to show motion blur, I will have to take, for example, half a second or 1 second or 4 seconds for light trails of cars going by. So this is our second value, the shutter speed. Then we come to the last but not least, ISO. The ISO is something that has become more important with the introduction of digital cameras, because with film I had to choose what my ISO is and put that regarding film into my camera, and then I was stuck there. I could not change ISO without changing the film. So, but nowadays with digital cameras we have more possibilities. We can set the ISO, for example, on an auto value. But what does ISO in general mean? If we have bright daylight, we can choose a low ISO. It will have low photosensitivity and we create less amount of noise. But if we go up to higher ISO values, which may be needed because I want to take pictures by night, then we will have a high photosensitivity, so there is less light needed to be catched on the sensor, but of course we will create more noise. This is something to keep in mind. The ISO is a value that you maybe not change that often in one situation where you're photographing in. So these are the dependent values for ISOs. With an ISO of 100 I create low noise, but I have also low photosensitivity, so it's good for example, daylight situations. The values between are, for example, for cloudy days, and the high ISOs are, for example, for night situations. The exposure triangle is that image that you will always find when people are talking about exposure. And the exposure triangle is all about these three values that we talked about. Here is the triangle, and here is the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. So here are the values. Well, the art of photography is now, in addition to the composition of the picture, of course, to balance the various possibilities of aperture, shutter speed and ISO so that the desired result is achieved. In modern cameras, there are various options for getting all or part of the work done automatically by the camera. In fully automatic mode, for example, the decisions are left entirely to the camera, and the result will hopefully be a good compromise. But then you have to live with that. But there are also other camera modes in which you make one or more settings yourself and leave only the rest to the decision of the camera. And I want to talk to you about these modes in the next tutorial. For today we're done with the first tutorial about exposure. I hope you enjoyed it and you were able to take some new knowledge with you. If you have any questions on this or any other topic, feel free to write me in the comments. I usually answer within a few hours. Don't forget to give me a like and please subscribe to my channel. Switch on the notifications so that you don't miss any more videos. For today, take care of yourself, have a good time, ciao!